Welcome to the Amy Edwards Show. I'm your host, Amy Edwards, and we are here to build our best lives in the most efficient way possible through better habits and mindset shifts with experts like today's guest. I'm so excited that you're here, and I'm so excited that you're here at Dr. Peter Cashio. Thank you so much for joining today, and I'm excited to learn about your journey and how you got to where you are today and what your bigger goal is, because I have a feeling I kind of understand your vision, but I can't wait to hear it from you. So can you start a little bit and tell us just who you are and a little bit about your background and your military background?
Yeah, for sure. So my name is Dr. Pete Cashio. I'm
Pete. Okay.
Peter, yeah.
All right, cool. Pete it is.
Yeah, I'm a board certified emergency medicine physician, and I also have a clinic in Dripping Springs / South Austin called Code 1 Concierge Care. And I don't know, going all the way back, there I was, a little boy wanting to be a doctor, but I got waylaid by the Marine Corps out of high school, and it was like, do you want to go blow things up and do exciting things? And I said, yeah, sure. And so I did that. I ditched a full ride scholarship that I had to be a chemical engineer, and I decided to go enlist in the Marine Corps and did intelligence work there for 5 years. Yep. Got out.
What age did you get out?
So I got out at 24.
Okay.
Yeah. So I got out. Yeah. So I got out and moved back to Texas and started going to UT.
Did you grow up here?
Oh, well, so I was born in Louisiana. Don't hold it against me. And I was raised in Houston. And then in 1986, the economy in Houston really crashed. It was an oil bust.
Oh, all the 80s oil stuff. Yeah.
So we moved to California, which was cool. And that's where I enlisted in the Marine Corps. So then I wanted to come back here. I talked to all my officers at the time, and I said, where should I go to college? And I had people advocating for A&M and Texas and University of Utah and UC California. And Texas seemed like the right fit. So I came back to Austin right outside the Marine Corps and lived in South Austin before South Austin was cool.
It was like nothing back then, right?
Oh,
it was like South Park Meadows was
an actual place you could go. Yeah, it was an actual venue.
Giant acre of land or something.
Yeah, 3 days after I got here, I'm at a concert. I think it was Jimmy Buffett at South Park Meadows. And I'm standing there, and all of a sudden, there's this weird smell in the air, and people are passing around big. And I was like, no thanks. But I was like, I'm definitely not, I'm in Austin for sure. Right?
Yeah. So you were doing your undergrad at 24?
Yeah, that's why I started. Yep.
Okay. So, I have a friend who went to medical school, like in his 20s, like decided kind of later.
Yeah.
And that's kind of unusual, right?
Very unusual.
Yeah. And so you have just a longer road ahead of you. What time? When did you end up completing your?
So I did graduate in 2000.
Okay.
And I wasn't sure what I was going to do with my life. So I worked for a year, did recruiting, called up people, got people jobs in the pharmaceutical industry. I worked a lot with one of the clinical trials companies here in Austin. And then I decided, actually, I'd like to maybe go to medical school. Grades weren't as good as I would have liked them to be. So let's go to graduate school. And I ended up at MD Anderson in 2001, the lab of Dr. Andreas Bergman. And I was his first graduate student ever. And he was German. And if you've ever worked...
Should I know who he is?
No.
Okay. I thought maybe he was a famous author.
No. But the lady he got his PhD from, it's like Dr. Nusland Volhard. She had won the Nobel Prize. Yeah. She won a Nobel Prize a couple years before for understanding how people like Drosophila, which is a fruit fly, which is a model organism, how you actually can study genetics in a replicable way. She'd gotten her Nobel Prize a couple
for
years.
Humans through fruit flies?
Yes, exactly.
Wow.
And so I was his first graduate student, and he was really tough on me, and it was a really good experience. I was around a lot of wonderful people. So MD Anderson, you're really there with Baylor College of Medicine. A lot of Nobel Prize laureates are coming through there or were working there. And so it was really fervent sort of academic environment. It was probably intellectually the most amazing time I had in my life. And it was a steep learning curve. But it was amazing.
It was your whole life, I bet, at that point. I mean, did you even have a life outside of that? I would think that was like all you're absorbed in.
Yeah, well, I mean, you do. Houston, you do the ginger man. You think but you learn to you actually live a life of science, right? You could afford to live in an apartment and go out and have beer, and you get paid a stipend, and you're doing lab work all the time, and you start to think about it. And it was really kind of great because I often tell people, and they say, well, so-and-so experience it's not going to be really useful to me. It's not going to get me towards where I want to go. And I often tell people, even my own children, I say, look, guys, you don't know what experiences will be useful to you later in life. So even if you're going through an experience like learning patterning genetics and we're doing research on Drosophila, like, the neurobiology of Drosophila, like it will have an impact later, and it actually has, right? And if I would say...
That's so true for anything.
Yeah.
I mean, anything that someone's doing, you can listen to that and know that it just holds value.
It does. And I always tell people, the other thing I tell people is that, even if you're in a situation where you can't see the value, just put your best effort forth day after day. I get a lot of people will tell me, my kids, people I've counseled and mentored over the years, they'll say, oh, that's just too hard. And I'm like, well, okay, it might be too hard right now, but if you chip away at it day by day by day by day, you'll become a master before you know it, right? Mm-hmm. No one starts off being the world's best doctor or the world's best neurosurgeon, cardiologist, that kind of stuff. Or
no, that'd be really weird if they did.
Right, but Americans we in America, I think it's strictly an American thing. We have this thought where you have to instantly be good at something, otherwise it's not worth doing. And I don't understand that. Rather
than understanding that you're going to suck at it at first, or you have to learn, you have to start somewhere. And
for sure,
starting is never going to be your finest moment.
Never. Yeah. No, you're right. So it was a great experience. I loved it. And then I applied to medical school, and it was a choice between being an MD, PhD, and, spending another 4 or 5 years in the lab, plus medical school, which is at a minimum 7 years of training. Uh-huh. At that time, I'm 31, 32, and I'm like, okay, I think I'd rather just go to medical school, but I never regret my training. It's taught me to think critically about a lot of things. Mm-hmm. And then medical school in San Antonio, played around with a lot of different specialties. I could have been so many things. Neurosurgeon was one for a long time. And then I ultimately decided to become an emergency medicine doctor because it's a little bit of everything. Mm-hmm. So I did that graduated from residency at University of Virginia in 2012. Charlottesville, great town. And I've been an ER doctor in Texas on and off since 2012. So a decade. Right?
A decade.
Yeah.
And then, but now, I just find it really interesting that people like you are trying to build a new model outside of insurance. And you have this concierge service that you're offering.
That's right.
And I have another friend who's doing that too, who worked in pharmaceuticals and things like that. He's been a guest on the show. Yeah. But he's trying to build something that serves people from a wellness
oh, for sure,
perspective rather than the reverse, which I'm sure you've just seen over and over
right.
and over.
For sure. I could tell you, if you want to hear about it, let me know, but there's a famous ER physician. I think he's retired. He's out of USC. His name is Billy Mallon, and he was notorious for being brilliant and fearless, and also foul-mouthed. Right? He would just tell you what he thought, regardless of feelings. And his longtime contention was that the emergency room in any city, in any town, in any area is the bird cage, the newspaper at the bottom of the bird cage. Okay, there is no healthcare system in America. There really isn't. Okay. There is no system, and the ER will show you how it's actually broken. And I can't tell you how many hundreds, probably thousands of horrible situations you find yourself in where someone's suicidal, but there's no one to take them. So you're stuck in an ER for 6 days, right?
Oh my God.
Or someone has, like a type of stroke that if they could only get to Houston, if they could only get the specialized type of endovascular care, they probably walk out and have a life, but you're in South Texas where the staff doesn't understand and you can't get anybody to take that patient. And then they're dying of a stroke, just time after time after time. And I can't tell you, the theme that broke the camel's back, or that was the kind of impetus for this clinic, was that so many time after time after time, I would see patients come to me and they would have these problems. And I'd say, well, did you ever talk to your primary care doctor? Because we are taught in medical school that your primary care doctor is the sort of avatar. They're the one that's kind of running the ship, and they should be able to coordinate the care and kind of do the really deep thinking about a patient's condition. And I will tell you, going to medical school, and I had friends whose fathers, like my friend Patrick Zimmerman, his wife's father was a internist, now retired in Vermont, and we went out to Christmas one year with them, and he was the most brilliant man I've ever met. And he was a family practice doctor in Vermont. He was amazing. And I thought, okay, your doctor should be like that. But what I found was, one, that's not true. And two, I didn't realize that nowadays most primary care doctors who were in what we call the fee for service model. I go to the doctor, I pay a copay, they see me, they take care of me, and then I walk away and I get a bill later. They have panels of 3, 4, 5,000 patients just because they need to make their numbers because they have a huge staff to build the insurance, costs a lot of money. And so that's why you can't get in. It's not their fault. I do not blame the doctors. Like, I just realized there had to be a better way, right? And so,
and from my perspective, I just get overwhelmed with it. I don't even have a primary care doctor right now. I mean, I kind of have like my friend's company that has a doctor, but I don't really like. If something were to happen, I don't know what I don't know what I'd do.
Right. And so, by the way, I have some great people in this area that I could refer you to. But and so
I was about to say, you're my doctor now.
Come on down.
I like what you're doing in the model of your business.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, and that's the thing. So, but then I was like, okay, well, anyway, so like COVID was the straw that broke the camel's back, really, because time after time after time. So we all take this thing that you may have heard about, the Hippocratic Oath. And the first principle is do no harm, but it's also, I will sacrifice for my patients. Like it's my job to be there for them in sickness and in health. Right. And as doctors, we were taught that you don't get to take a day off. Now, if you're out of the clinic, you're taking vacation or it's the weekend, that's fine. But if your patient's sick and it's when you're supposed to be there, you have to figure out how to take care of them. You don't get to just abandon them because I don't feel like it or because I might get COVID. But I can't tell you how many doctors, and again, this is not in the Austin area. This is like where I was working at ERs in South Texas and San Antonio. I can't speak to conditions here, but patients would show up in the ER and they would just say, I can't, my doctor, they didn't even see me. They just sent me to the ER or they wouldn't do anything for COVID which I don't want to get into the COVID politics, but they wouldn't do anything for them other than like just wait at home. And that's a complicated story, but it was just like, where's your doctor? Where's your doctor keeping ahead of this problem? And realizing that it's just, there had to be a better way. So
there has to be. And again, like, I think it's important that you said it's not the doctor's fault necessarily because they're so inundated with people from the way that the system is set up or not set up.
I don't want to get into that because people can get offended, feelings hurt and upset. But what I tell people, and you might be a perfect example, I don't know, but I tell people all the time, when they come join my practice the first time, that first meeting is anywhere from 90 minutes to 2 hours. And I always tell them, we're just getting started. You may have to come back and we may have to finish this or do a Zoom call and finish it, right? Like, I have a lot more questions. There's more data to collate. And it's a lot of work to get a new patient, right? Is you have to think about everything that they're telling you, figure out what's real and what's not real, figure out what the other doctors or people they've seen, right? And then, over time you start to get a sense for what's really important. What levers can you push on to make a big difference in their lives? And I always hear this, Amy. I hear, oh, well, I don't ever use a doctor much. You'll probably never hear from me again. I'm like, you say that, but once you realize it's so easy to get a hold of your doctor, and once you realize that the doctor actually cares and has the time to listen to you, you find this thing that I've been wondering about forever. I'll just ask the question, and all of a sudden you're encouraged to do so, and it just kind of builds, and you start to actually feel empowered about your health as opposed to, well, I don't have time to think about it, or it won't matter anyway, so why even bother?
And on top of that, I feel like I'm being a bother. Like,
yes.
I'm asking for too much. And I know there's probably a whole other thing in there that's personal. But yeah, I mean, like, I know I've felt like that in the past, and there was no model. Like, I was never taught how to navigate that, really, I don't think, to just be able to ask.
You have resources, and you're intelligent. Not that most people aren't, but like, you have some resources that your network that you can lean on, right? Now imagine
I look like I would know what's up with a doctor, right?
Right.
And so that's why I'm confessing that I don't really. The dirty little secret,
so my ex-wife, she's a lovely human. We just didn't work together well. She has an autoimmune condition, and I'm going to tell you that even going to the doctor with her, I would still walk out of there with her. Like, we would be scribbling notes, and I'd still have no idea what just happened.
Really?
Right? Or what the plan is, right? And so, it's
confusing.
Right.
And if you're not feeling well on top of it, it's extra confusing.
And I'm a physician.
Right.
And a trained research scientist. And I would still come out of these appointments like, wait, I don't understand. What are we doing? What's the plan?
Holy crap. Well, if you can't.
Right. And so that's my whole thought, right? I don't ever expect my patients to just get it. I always say, just if you don't know, just ask me. And so one of the gripes I have, and it's stressful for me because sometimes I'll get inundated with pings and texts from my patients like, what about this? What about this? So I'm trying to manage the flow, but I would much rather hear that, oh my God, you ended up in the hospital than I had 3 days. Oh, by the way, I just got to the hospital. And I have to train my patients who pay me every month. It's okay to ask me questions. It's okay to tell me I don't feel well. And that's horrible, right?
Yeah.
I hate that, right? And so sorry, I'm going to get a little emotional here, but
No.
So I just really, I think that, I want people to actually be able to access their health because look, when you're young and you're immortal, you think that you're going to be on this earth forever. And I, as a physician, know that's not true, right? And so I try to make a different delineation between there is the health that you feel like I feel good in my skin today. I got sleep. I had a really good time with my family last night, or, oh God, I should not have had that extra glass of wine. You know what I mean, right?
Yeah.
We've all been there. And then there's the silent health that you don't feel, but is very much a present. Like I've got a tumor growing in your lung, or you've got colon cancer, right? And so the balance is between my job is, and what I'm striving to do better every day is to find a good balance between helping people to feel their best, to like give them the information and the big levers that they can do to make themselves feel better or help themselves feel better. I can't make them do anything, and I don't try, but also to, get their numbers so that they don't have to worry. Like they can just tick that box off. If I'm doing X, Y, and Z, I don't have to worry. I'm doing the preventative, and you just get on with your life. I don't want you to be a sick person, right?
Yeah.
You're a human. I have this person who's had this unique life and unique experiences. And then, I might have back problems, or I might have heart disease, or I might have high cholesterol. Okay, great. Let's manage that. But go back to your life. I don't want you to think of yourself as sick, right?
Yeah.
And I think that really resonates with people.
Are you ready to up-level your pleasure practice? I have in mind, and one of the tools that I've used is from Wands. That's WAANDS. One of my favorite items that they have is the cervix wand. It is their #1 best-selling glass pleasure wand for vaginal and anal de-armoring. That means more sensation. That means more getting in touch with your body. It's designed for cervical and G-spot stimulation, and it has helped thousands of women become more connected to themselves and their own pleasure while supporting them to heal pelvic pain through self-yoni massage. So if you are curious about getting more in touch with yourself, then I have an offer for you. You can get a discount using my code Amy Edwards, but if you use the link in the show notes, you can get 20% off from Wands. They have so many other beautiful items to choose from, with a large selection of 100% pure crystal pleasure wands. They create the most gorgeous, luxurious products that encourage you to honor your body, celebrate your sexuality, and live in pleasure, which is a big part of what we're about on this show. And yes, I use one myself. So go today to wands.com, that's WAANDS, and use the code Amy Edwards for 10% off, or use my link in the show notes for 20% off of your purchase from Wands. Again, my favorite is the cervix wand. It is trademarked and it is amazing. Take it from me. Check it all out and the reviews on wands.com. That's WAANDS.com, and use my link in the show notes for 20% off. Did you ever feel like what you were trying to accomplish with this was just a drop in the bucket and it feels frustrating?
Sure.
Because I can imagine like a lot of, I don't know, sometimes you just want to make a difference so bad and you're like, I think you're a good example that just start doing it,
Yeah.
And I think that's sometimes easy to lose sight of because people want to think bigger and change the entire system right now,
So I was having a conversation with a mentor of mine last night, and, he was helping me clarify a lot of things. And I actually do have a process that I hadn't realized that it was a process. And that process is essentially the first 3 months or 12 weeks that you're my patient. For lack of a better term, it's a boot camp, right? Like we're assessing your labs, or like, I'm going to recommend these things. And, if we have a trainer who just moved to California, but he's still virtual with a lot of our patients. And like, we have a trainer on site, or come out to you. We're getting a nutritionist on board. I'll give you diet counseling or coaching. I'll tell you,
Nice.
like, keep it simple, stupid. That's what I say. Like, life is so complicated that my job is not to make your life more complicated. Here are these simple steps, these 5 simple steps that you can do every day that's actually going to make you feel better. And it's going to improve these numbers so that you can be around to see your grandkids or to see your kids grow up or to be strong. If you're a lot of families don't get started until the parents are in their 30s. So now they're in their 40s or early 50s and their kids are teenagers and they're like, I need to be able to keep up with my kids, right? So here are the things that you can do. And I always tell them, I'm honest. I don't ever want to sell snake oil. And I'm always honest with my patients. Like, I struggle with some things you do. Like, I'm a well-educated version of you in this one area. You could tell me all about real estate. I have VPs, like corporate VPs. There are Google millionaires. Like, it's not a brag. They're subject matter experts in these things, and I wouldn't begin to tell them how to write code. But I can tell you about this. But otherwise, I put my pants on the same as you. And, these are struggles that I've either seen with my patients or that I personally struggle with. And so when I give you a recommendation, I recognize that I have to be the avatar of what I'm saying. Like, I have to have lived that and walked a mile in your shoes, so to speak, at least, in the past, so that I would never tell you something that A, didn't believe in, or B, didn't think the risk of harm to you was so low and the potential benefit is so high, So I kind of try to be a real human who's a doctor, and you have to there's a fine line because people want their doctors to be doctors and not a regular Joe. And I get that, but I also try to tell people that, yeah, I'm a human like you and you have these issues and here's what my opinion is. And if you disagree with me, that's fine. Like, if you go and find some data somewhere else, which has happened a lot. It's always happened through my career that either my ex-wife or, other patients, I joke. I don't know if I've told Rana the joke, but like, I joked about how I lost a bet in my first year out of residency with a lady who swore she was pregnant. And I was like, no, you're not. Your test said the urine test said you're negative. She's like, I want the blood test. And I said, no, I was arrogant. You know how young doctors are, right? And she said, I'm pregnant and I want you to do the blood test. And I was like, okay. So cocky. I said, I'll tell you what, I will pay you $5 if you're right, if the blood test comes back positive. And sure enough, it did. It was like the detection level for the urine is 20 nanograms per milliliter. And she was at 18. She knew it and she was right. And I was wrong. And I paid her the money. I'm like, I will never forget this. And so I try to keep humble
about trusting your patients.
Yeah.
Right? About trusting people about their own bodies.
Well, you do and you don't. You listen to them. You have to make an education, but also keep in the mind, like, maybe this is my research background, but one, you never have all the information you need. And two, you don't know everything about everything. There's no such thing as perfect knowledge. And so the smart scientist, the smart physician always goes, okay, but what if I'm wrong? How can I assess whether I'm wrong? And is there new information? So I've had patients change my practice for positive ways all through the years. With my men's health patients, my women's health patients, they've all said, if you did this or if you thought about this, this would this really move the needle. Okay. And I'll do my research and I'll talk to them about it and I'll see what the consensus is in the medical community. If I think it's safe and effective, we're going to make a practice change. We're going to inject a different way. I'm going to be comfortable prescribing estrogen to my patients who are after menopause, but I won't give hormones to women who are not yet through menopause because that's just bougie BS that causes a lot of harm, right? And so I can tell them, listen, I don't want to do that because, like, testosterone pellets.
I've been hearing a lot about testosterone pellets.
Yeah. So quick aside, I am not an endocrinologist, so please consult with your doctor. But I've had several ladies who were in their late 40s, early 50s, who were either through or like in the middle of or through menopause. And they go to the doctors and the latest hotness is to get testosterone pellets. Oh, well, your libido is low. Okay. This gives some testosterone. You feel like things aren't as firm as they should be. Have some estrogen. Mm-hmm. And, I see them a year later after, like, they've been going through these hormones for a year. Their hairs are falling out. Things are just falling apart. Like, their blood sugar's out of control. Their thyroid's non-functional. And I'm like, what is going on? And so I tell them.
That's so scary.
Yeah. And I would so if you or your audience are ever talking to a doctor about hormones, ask, like, what's the worst that could happen? And do I really need this? And it turns out, again, right, KISS principle, Amy. Mm-hmm. Most people, especially women, we talk about, why are you feeling like your libido's low? When was the last time your husband took you on a date? When's the last time he surprised you in a good way? Not an but like that's exciting. He just like showed up and whisked you away to some weekend or something. When was the last time he paid for somebody to take care of the kids so that you guys could go do some crazy weekend adventure? And when I have these conversations, it's not unusual for me to hear back a couple of months later, like, hey, how's everything? Oh, it's great. I told my husband this and this and this, and it's had to change. And all of a sudden things are happening. Like, oh, all these things that were treated with hormones are now fixed, right?
Wow.
And so I just try to keep it simple, do the things that won't harm and, are really important. So anyway.
Yeah. And you're right. Like we have to have a holistic view of our lives, and that's so crucial.
That is.
Good for you. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I want to ask you, when you talked about that story about the woman and the pregnancy
Yeah,
test,
for sure.
did it give you a new appreciation for being wrong? Because it seems to have made an impression. I heard somebody, it was Tim Dillon the other day, I was listening to him, and he was saying he said, maybe I'm wrong and I love to be wrong. And that just has stayed with me. And because I thought, gosh, so many times we love to be right. And I just wondered, how you view being wrong. Like, do you have just an appreciation for it after an experience like that and throughout your practice?
Right. So it's a little different when you're a doctor, because especially as an ER doctor, I've done critical care, like being wrong can be lethal. Right. And so you fear it, right? It's like, okay. And that's why.
Good point.
Right. So if you ever wonder why a lot of doctors are very conservative, at least in terms of what they're going to do with medicine, it's because they have seen patients die or be seriously harmed from things.
Yeah.
Like, for example, a common thing is a patient wanting a test. Well, I want to test for this. Okay, why? What are you going to do with that result? Let's say that you think you might have a brain tumor or an aneurysm. That's the best example, right?
Okay.
Brain aneurysm. Well, my mom died of an aneurysm. I want to see if I have one. Okay. So what are you going to do with that? So what happens if you get diagnosed with an aneurysm? Let's say that it's just below the amount that would be surgically intervenable. I forget what that is now. It's a couple of millimeters. But now you are going to see the neurosurgeon. And I'm going to tell you, once the brain is cracked, no one's ever the same. There's an old book called When the Air Hits Your Brain.
What do you mean when the brain is cracked?
Once you have had any kind of neurosurgery of any sort, you are not the same person. Things change. People lose senses of smell. They get headaches. Sometimes it can be personality changes. Brain surgery is a big deal, right?
Whoa.
Oh, yeah. And so it's not trivial. So now you have gotten your brain scan and you now hadn't discovered that you have an aneurysm. Now you're thinking, oh my God, is there a bomb in my head? Am I going to die? Mm-hmm. So that has a moral damage and moral harm to you, right? Maybe I don't go do things that I would normally do, or maybe I do things that are harmful to me because, YOLO, right? Mm-hmm. So my kids would say, Dad, that's pretty cringe. But so you go into the neurosurgeon does this thing and he talks to you, and he might be a wonderful guy, but he's talking and all you can hear is wah, 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 aneurysm, wah, 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 surgery. Because
you're filtering it through a lens of that.
Right, for sure. Mm-hmm. And so let's say he says you need surgery. And now you go get the surgery and maybe it ruptures and you die, or maybe it ruptures and you get a stroke. Maybe it doesn't rupture, but something's just not right. Personality wise, your memory isn't what it was. Something's off, right? Whatever you had, whatever zest, that little that defined you is a little off now.
Oh God, that's frightening. And you said when oxygen hits the brain?
Well, it was a title of a book.
Really?
When the air hits your brain.
When the air hits your brain?
Not literally, but it was the idea.
That means when they open you up.
Yeah, when you have neurosurgery, once you have a procedure. It was the title of a book. It was a little catchy, right? But but the idea is that when you have a neurosurgical procedure, people are almost never the same. I'm sure I will get some comments to the opposite, but most neurosurgeons I know would say that was true. And it's a known risk. And neurosurgery is God bless them, is a very depressing field. There's a lot of tough things that happen in that field, right? Which is originally why I didn't pursue it. But that being said, when let's say that you didn't have the surgery, but now you live your life going, what if? And here's the funny part. They've done autopsies on patients, right? The cadavers that come to the medical school that people donate to science. Mm-hmm. And I think anywhere from 3 to 5% of all cadavers have aneurysms. So in other words, they went their whole life. They had an aneurysm. They never knew it.
So I could have an aneurysm right now.
And it never affected them, right? They never died. They didn't die of it.
What?
Yes. And we're talking about brain aneurysms specifically. And so like you now went through all that suffering and all that harm. So when I ask patients like, I want to do this test or I want to do this procedure or I want to whatever, I was like, yeah, but let's think consequences, right? So I try to do that when it comes to hormones too. Like, what can we fix first, right? What can we do? Because once you start messing with hormones, things start getting out of whack real fast.
Well, that's again, like keeping it simple. That's the opposite. It's like making it more complicated when you introduce all these things rather than looking at some very simple things like how are you sleeping and how much are you maybe drinking?
Right.
What's your personal connections like? How are your relationships? Like really fundamental things that I just see it in my own people I know and stuff. And they'll say, I've tried everything. And you're like, really? Like, how are you sleeping? What's your intake? Just some very simple things that you could seem like you can do.
Well, but I'm sure you would agree, or maybe corroborate some of this, but you have to be in a place in yourself, my experience, where you have to be ready to say, okay, there are some things in my life that I need to change. Right. So if you're not getting enough sleep, again, this is one of the most frustrating things that I do, but it's one of the most essential, right? Tell me about your sleep. Most of my patients get to, Dr. Cashio at one point, how are you sleeping? Tell me about what time do you go to bed? What do you do before you go to bed? What time do you get up? What is your quality of sleep? Do you snore? Do you have sleep apnea? Like I've gotten people to use their oral devices or masks or nasal things, and now they can breathe. Now they don't snore like anymore. Their oxygen levels are, because they had low oxygen all night. They never really got good sleep. So they're always behind the curve, right? So you can make some fundamental differences. Like the most common one I tell people is that most people don't need to be up till 11 o'clock at night. Like there is little that most people can do, even if you're the CEO of a major company, unless they're around the world, but we're talking about, your business is local or national. What's the benefit of working at 10 o'clock to midnight? Like among entrepreneurs, there's this idea, like I burn the candle 24/7. I'm all going hard, and the reality is that people just don't work that way. And it has these little negative effects that snowball. And pretty soon, like you're metabolically out of whack. You haven't exercised. Your diet's out of control because when you don't get enough sleep, it disrupts one of your appetite hormones called ghrelin. Like you can't regulate what you eat,
I will shove anything in my face.
Right. If you've been up all night, right, or you've been out, like even if you never drank, but you went out all night, you partied and you danced, and you got like, what do people crave at 2 a.m. or 3 a.m? Like pizza, carbs, something just I want the word, like give me the fries, right? Yeah. And so that part of that is a hormonal dysregulation, right? And so when I get folks to actually say, look, we need to make these changes, and you're going to have to contemplate going to bed at 9 o'clock at night and getting up at 5. Ben Franklin, I think it was Ben Franklin. Yeah. Early to bed, early to rise, healthy, wealthy, and wise. It actually works. And I've had patients like, oh my God, like I have my life back. I have time to contemplate these things. I'm getting good sleep. Like everyone's in bed. Like the kids learn that it's okay to go to bed early, and parents are going to bed early. So it's okay. They don't need to stay up all night, right? It has positive effects on the whole family. And I always tell people, like whether you're the, like say wife, if you're a stay-at-home mom, or you're the breadwinner, whoever that is in the family, like you are critical to your family's well-being, whether you're the mom or the dad. You're absolutely critical. And if you don't take care of yourself, it's not being selfish to take care of yourself. It's being prudent for your family. Because what happens if you die early of heart disease or stroke? Because I didn't have time to take care of myself. Your kids don't care. They would rather have, they'll give back those, things that you did to have you there and be present, right?
I'm doing a 12-step program right now in Al-Anon, and I'm on step 4, which is really long. But anyway, you do like a full inventory. But one of the things, I answer all these questions. Anyway, one of the questions I answered the other day was, how do I show love for others? And I realized like one of the key ways is taking care of myself. Like that's a really good way that I show love for others, because I'm actually operating better
at your best self
for them.
Yes, exactly.
When I'm taking care of myself.
Yeah.
And it's just this paradox. Everything's a paradox. Everything is like,
well, I've even told my kids that. They recognize. They're like, oh, not enough sleep last night.
How old are your kids?
So I have Jude, he's 8, and Cole is 12.
Wow.
Going on 20. There it goes, right?
Mine are 4 years apart too.
Yeah.
But they can tell when you don't have enough sleep now. Yeah, right.
Yeah, they're like grumpy daddy voice. I'm like, oh, sorry, didn't sleep well last night. And we have that communication, so they can, he's not just mad, he's just you didn't get enough sleep.
And they say grumpy dad voice?
Yeah, they're like using your grumpy dad voice.
I love that.
Well, no, because
that's so effective.
Right. So I didn't always used to have good emotional regulation, and I started seeing a therapist.
That's a nice way to put it. I didn't always have good emotional regulation.
Yeah. Right. Like, yeah, just leave it at that. But
I get it.
now, a couple of years ago, I started seeing a guy named Dave Cantu, and I love him to death. I respect the hell out of him. He's a life coach. I think he's still up in North Austin. And if you looked at him, you think, here's this little wisp of a guy. He talks in a soft voice, and he's just like, he kind of floats along as he walks. And I realized later he's a professional dancer, so that's why he does it. Right. But, I was like hyper masculine, like, what the hell? I'm not going to learn anything from you, right? And he taught me, like, he would ping me and be like, yeah, you're off there. You realize you're griping at me because you're mad at something else. And I was like, no, I'm not. And I'd go stomp off, and I'd realize, he's right, and I'd circle back. And so after, 3 years of counseling, I would say he helped me transform myself. And, I always tell my patients, like, if you can actually learn to open that third eye and look at yourself for who you actually are, or enable the people in your life to say, hey, wait a minute, you're acting off, it's going to save you a lot of grief. You don't always have to emotionally react to things. You can have a stop sign or some sort of mechanism in place to go, oh, well, I may not be able to control how I feel, but I can control how I act. So I'm going to be quiet right now and not say anything until I figure out what's going on. And it's been really, really helpful for me.
Well, since we're on the topic of self-reflection.
Sure, yeah.
I see that you also offer, as a doctor, some ketamine therapy and I think cannabis.
Yeah,
Is
so
that true?
I have the license to medically prescribe the THC that is allowed by the state of Texas. It's not like marijuana that you can smoke or anything like that.
Sure. Yeah, I wasn't sure what was legal in Texas. But I'm curious about why you're offering ketamine and how you came into that.
Great question. So one of my areas of interest my whole career as a physician, chronic pain. And again, without getting into too much detail, there are folks in my family who suffer from horrific disfiguring because it twists their body pain. And most doctors don't want to deal with pain. They don't understand it.
Why?
Because it's complicated, because the patients are emotional and needy. Like, you can't always fix them.
Because they're in pain.
I know, but just bear with me. No, bear. I understand.
I wasn't snapping at you. I was agreeing.
But bear with me. Like, so as a physician, I love the win, right? I have, as an ER doctor, for example, been in the middle of an ER that's literally going crazy. People are sick as crap, and I'm getting called, Dr. Cashio, come over to this patient here. And I walk by, and oh my God, this patient's having, like the family freaks out, and the patient goes into cardiac arrest. I don't have time for this. Literally slammed him on the sternum. It's called a precordial thump. And they literally came back and looked, and like, we get him stabilized, and like, okay, great. We've got the epidrip. I call it, and I'm running back to, like, you just learn.
Wow.
Yeah, you like the win. And later you reflect on it, like, that was pretty awesome. Pretty rare, but pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Our cardiology colleagues are probably rolling their eyes at me right now, but it happened. But we like the win. And what do you do about chronic pain? You can't fix them. We can rarely fix them. And it's hard as a doctor who wants to help people to say, I don't know what I can do for you. And narcotics are horrible. There may be a good long-term solution in the right context, the right people.
You mean stuff like Oxy and things?
I'm actually talking, so Oxys can be, so to be really effective at pain management, in my opinion, I'm not a board certified pain management specialist, but you need to do like genetic profiles of people. Like, there are these things in the liver called cytochrome P450s. There's a lot of them for a lot of different things, but the cytochromes, some of them can be hyperactive. In other words, you will metabolize a substance faster. Like, some people, as you drink more coffee, for example, more caffeine, you tell your body, oh, he needs to process a lot of caffeine over time. So we're going to produce more of these basically breakdown engines, the CYP450, and we're going to metabolize that caffeine. So if you notice the more coffee you drink, the more volume you drink, the more it takes to really get an effect, right? It's because you're telling your body there's more of it. Your body says, oh, I need to be more efficient at breaking it down. Same thing happens for pain meds. So if you know anybody who's been on pain medication, the lucky patient gets to stay on the same dose for years and they're fine. But what really commonly happens is they have to increase over time. It's because their bodies are getting very efficient at breaking it down. And so, and that leads to addiction. And, there has been a lot of abuse on the patient side. There's been a lot of pill mills on the physician and medical practitioner side over the years. So in the 90s when
What's a pill mill?
Oh, you haven't heard that story?
No.
So they're thankfully much more rare than they used to be. But let's say mid 2000, early to 2010s, about late 2010s. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to say about 2009 to about 2018 or so. Like most physicians could write for oxys and Percocets and everything like that. And several entrepreneurial / morally absent or deficient doctors or nurse practitioners or whomever, right, would say, pay me cash and I'll write you a prescription for your chronic pain without an exam. And they would just write it and then people would start selling it, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And so that's the pill mill. And I can distinctly remember driving to an ER in Corpus Christi years ago. And this doctor who was notorious for being a pill mill, like people were lined up outside his office at 6:50 a.m., just a line around the block ready to get their prescriptions. I'm like, so for chronic pain, there's like, there's, to be fair to the physicians and to us, there's a lot of manipulative behavior. Now, whether patients feel like they need to manipulate because that's the only way the doctor will take them seriously, or if they need to, kind of like they don't believe that the doctor, or they're actually trying to get it so they can, doctor shop and pill shop. It's this constant battle, right? Like you can never know who's telling the truth. And even people who've been good for years can all of a sudden have this weird pattern. You're like, it's saying that you've got 2 prescriptions. I've been your only prescriber for the last year, but now all of a sudden you're getting 3 prescriptions from this other doctor. What happened? And then you're just like, so it's, and we can lose our license, right? Mm-hmm. So all that background is to say, like, that's why a lot of doctors don't like to deal with chronic pain, because it's frustrating on the legal side. It's frustrating because you can't fix patients because, we have regulatory, like we need to do a drug test to make sure you're taking your pills. What if you don't respond, if you need to increase in the dose? And so all that background. And in the ER, we deal with acute pain. So I'd see a lot of people come into ER and they're like, oh, I lost my prescription, or I ran out, or the dog ate my prescription, or whatever. And you're having to make these judgment calls. But a lot of people were poorly managed. And, I like to solve problems. I'm like, well, there's got to be a better way. And one of the interesting things, one of the meds that we use all the time in the ER is ketamine. Now we use it in called sedative doses. Mm-hmm. So if you need to have like a little kid needs a laceration repair, commonly they get ketamine. Okay. Mm-hmm. Because it has a rapid onset, rapid offset. It's very safe medication. And then we use it for adults as well. I've reset many, many fractures. And then over the years, what I would notice is like people with horrible fractures, give them ketamine and they'd wake up and they'd be like pain-free. They'd be awake and talking to you. In other words, not gone, not out of it, but actually like responding intelligently to questions. But I'm like, do you want anything for the pain? No, I'm good. And it turns out that what we call subdissociative doses of ketamine, in other words, lower doses have a really amazing pain response. Now it's short-lived and lasts for like an hour or so or 2, but it's way superior to morphine and oxys and all this other stuff, at least in terms of acute pain. And so even I'm sure Austin EMS has it, because most EMS programs do. They have a ketamine protocol for pain. Like someone gets a fracture, we're giving them ketamine. We're not giving them morphine, and it works better for them. Right. And so I'm very familiar with it. And, I don't know if I've really touched on it, but mental health is a huge part of my practice, like huge.
We haven't.
Yes, we haven't. So my practice is built on a pillar of like mental health, sleep, optimal nutrition, preventative maintenance, and then obviously anything that comes up that needs to be managed, right? Chronic pain, chronic management, or chronic condition management if you have diabetes or whatnot. But mental health is huge, right? So your perception of pain, your perception of anything is entirely affected by your mental health, right? Are you mad at your boyfriend, fight a fight with your parents? Are you sad about a job loss or whatever, right? We know that. We know that it matters a lot. And I've also recognized that if you're going to move the needle for somebody, if they're going to be healthy, if they're going to get better, they have to be in a right place mentally, right? And I don't have the bandwidth to be your emotional counselor, but I now have 2 counselors, one that are in the clinic that see their own patients that, and some of them are my patients and some of their own, but they see people and they do it. And I get great response. Like, I went and talked this issue out with this person. It was really great. And now I feel ready to move on and take the next step. Right. And so that's a real big part of it. Right. And so looking at what we can do in terms of helping people, I recognize that, ketamine might have a role. And so I started deep diving, and sure enough, ketamine for like mood disorders or mental health, like, depression, can be very helpful in acute management of suicide. It can buy you some time if you can't get into a program or something like that. For anxiety, it's effective. For PTSD, it's very effective. And this is low dose infusions. Sometimes the oral types, what's called
Have you used it yourself?
No. I don't feel like the need, and that would be kind of abusive. Right. So like,
I don't know. It might give you a different understanding of it or something like that.
Well, I've dosed it. I've given it thousands of times. Right. And so, but it would be, how do I put that? There's no indication. And so I don't think it would be moral.
Like responsible.
Right. Yeah. Moral or responsible to do so. So yeah.
Yeah.
But so we give it for folks with depression, anxiety, PTSD. There are people who, it's very effective for chronic pain. They use very high doses, and it's a whole thing. And I'm not quite ready to do ketamine for chronic pain.
When you say high dose, what's like a low dose and a high dose?
It depends. So for like mood disorders, you start them at, it's 0.6, about 0.2 to 0.4 milligrams per kilogram over 45 minutes. Now, to give you some perspective, if I'm giving someone IV in the ER and they've broken their leg, I'm giving them 1 or 2 at once. 1 or 2 milligrams per kilogram at once, right? So let's say they weigh 100 kilograms, 220, 220-pound man, you're getting about 200 milligrams of ketamine push dose in the ER.
That's a lot.
That's a lot, right?
Yeah, that's a lot.
That same person, as long as he's not on antidepressants, as long as he's not like on Xanax or Valium or anything like that, I might start him at like, I don't know, do the calculation in my head. I might start him at like 60, 70, 5 milligrams over 45 minutes. And then you sort of step up as they have a response. That's
about what I started at. I've done a series a couple of years ago. So I've done it intravenously, and I've done it as a shot.
Okay.
So for
what was your experience like?
I think that it fundamentally changed some negative thought patterns that I had. Yeah. I experienced ruminations, which I thought was normal, negative ruminations. And so after my first time, I had new thoughts, and it changed some ingrained neural pathways, I believe. Yeah. And then my partner used it too, and he was still struggling with addiction before he went to treatment last year, but he had always, when he had struggled, had suicidal thoughts, but post ketamine, he didn't have any suicidal thoughts last year, and he noticed. It's just funny when you can notice, I have different thoughts right now, and that's surprising me, So for me, I think it really made a huge difference. And I credit ketamine with a lot of it. And I'm glad I did it. I kind of did it on a whim because I wanted to interview someone who was a practitioner. And so I thought, well, I better experience it. And then I was right after that initial one, I was like, I want to buy a series or do something because I think this is
good. Right?
I'm noticing new thoughts. And I mean, it was important to me. Good. So I am sober right now and not doing any work like that. Not to say I never will, but I'm really grateful for what it offered me. So I do think that it's really useful.
Thank you for telling me that and sharing that story. It's not easy, right? But yeah, that's really important. And if I were to able to help someone like you through a period of time, I would, that's a win, right? We did something good and we changed your life in a positive way, right? Yeah. I'd love to talk to you more offline about this, about your experiences. But there's and again, I'm not tooting my own horn, but there are some other folks in the Austin area whom I talk to that are doing even more interesting things in terms of mental health for veterans and PTSD.
I was going to ask you about veterans since you are one, you know, and I'm sure you've seen a lot of people who have left the military but still suffer from or struggle with PTSD.
Yeah, in my area, there are a lot of former special forces, Navy SEALs, and those folks more than your average military. I never saw in combat. I'm never going to claim it. Never did. Mad that I didn't want to at the time, and now as an older, more mature adult, I'm really glad I didn't have to go through that. Yeah. But there's a lot that they are really suffering, and those are the hard. Those guys break your heart because you really they deserve our help, and they cannot often get it. So, yes, I do work with them and try to build up a network with the veterans in the community. Where I'm at, it's starting to be stronger, like a veterans community. So,
Yeah.
I don't think the VA pays for ketamine, but not
Maybe they will, it's definitely getting more mainstream, especially for treatments like that. So
yeah, for sure. I think Joe Rogan had somebody on his podcast a while back, and the guy comes to Austin once a month as a comedian. And I can't remember his name offhand, but he just swears by it. I'm like, great, because ultimately as a doctor, that's the first rule: do no harm, right?
yeah.
And so, are you going to get the addiction potential of ketamine is less than caffeine, right? So people won't become, no, it really is.
No, I'm way more addicted to caffeine.
Yeah, for sure, right? Take me, like what I told Raina earlier, like you can take the cold coffee from my cold dead fingers one day, right? Like that's, but ketamine is less addictive than that. So a lot of people, am I going to become addicted? Nope. What are some negative side effects? And sometimes you might get some hallucinations. And I will tell you, in the ER setting, not in my clinic, I've had people get hallucinations from ketamine. You give them a little Valium equivalent. And then you ask them after they recovered, like, would you still have gone through the ketamine? Absolutely, every one of them, right? Like, I've never had someone hate their ketamine experience. And that's
huge.
I started in 2009. So that's 15 years of being a practicing physician, either as a resident or an attending.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah, so, it's a pretty good track record because it is scary. It's scary.
Terrifying. Yeah, especially like you're gonna put an IV in my arm and do what now?
Yeah,
gonna make me trip out? Yeah, it takes a little bit of explanation for sure.
It does. What's your tattoo?
Oh yeah, so I spent 2 years in Japan, and I finally decided to get a tattoo last year because it was time. And it's a Japanese warrior, but it actually integrates integrates a couple of different things. So there's stuff for the Marine Corps. This is all my children's initials are woven into it. It's a work in progress. Mark Van Ness, by the way, shout out, bro. You're really good. And the other part is a little demon. It's called an Oni, which is a Japanese demon. And this guy symbolizes the fears and the negative thoughts are always lurking in all of us, right? There's always that voice saying, you're not good enough. Who do you think you are? You can't do this, or you're going to fail, or she'll say no, or whatever, right? Like, oh, it's not possible. That voice is always there. You ever read Stephen Pressfield's The War of Art?
One of my favorites.
Okay.
Read it many, many times.
Yeah, he's like that little voice, who is it? Andy Frisella calls it the bitch voice.
Yes, he does.
Right. And so, Andy's bitch voice, and I think Stephen probably had a better term for it. Guy's a Marine, by the way. Hoo-yah.
Stephen Pressfield is?
Yeah, he was a Marine.
I didn't even realize that.
Yeah, he's a Marine. So he talks about
so much of his work. I can't believe I didn't know that. Yeah.
He talks about like you just need to get every day, like as a writer, he'll talk about like you need to have a process. You need to get in there and fix the things and do the things that you need to do, and damn the external world, because that little voice is always there saying, you can take a day off. And once you start listening to that guy, that's the road to failure. And so this guy's tattooed on there as a way to remind myself every time I come out of the shower, like, oh yeah, are you fighting your demons? Or are you like overcoming your own self? Because I think we're all our worst enemies most of the time.
For sure. Yes. Oh, that's super interesting.
Yeah.
Well, what does that look like day to day for you? Do you just feel like you fight the fight and to keep going and silencing those voices, or?
Oh yeah, I mean, so
I'm not living by them.
So I'm a human being, right? Sorry, I'm a human being.
Yes.
And so some days are wins and some days are not, right? So like, have you ever heard of Andy Frisella's like 75 hard program?
Of course.
Okay.
Yes.
Done it twice.
I only made it like maybe third of the way.
It's brutal. He's not
Something
lying.
came up. I can't remember.
He's right.
Typical answer.
Actually, he'll often say, and I've put a lot through my patients through the program, and I always say, your big fail points are 2 weeks in, 45 days in, and then 5 to 10 days from the end, because you start to get lazy, right? That's when for various reasons. No, but he and I've taken and I attribute everything. I attribute like the process to him. So like that, him and Miracle Morning, Hal Elron, those guys, right? Like all these guys, you basically need to have a process, and that process is you take the guesswork out of your day, right? So I wake up at 4:30, God, for most days, right? 4:30. Sometimes actually I need to back it off to 4.
What time you go to bed?
8 o'clock, 8:30.
Oh wow.
My kids know, or maybe 9 on a late night. Like I just have to, because that time in the morning, 4 a.m., 4:30, lately I've been slacking. It's 4:30. Usually it used to be like 4 a.m.
Slacker, getting up at 4:30.
Well, because I lose time. I actually lose time. Like I'm right in the middle of a creative thing. Got to stop and get my kids ready for school.
Yeah.
Right. And so, but 4 a.m. workout, and then like 45 minutes. And then now that my brain's awake, okay, here's the thing. So I have a layout of the goals that I need to do and like my progress. I do a lot of the 75 hard, but I when I'm not 75 harding, I do one less workout, like one workout. And I just do that every single day. And I integrate like his top 5 things that I need to get done today to move the needle. And I have there's like he'll say business, but for me it's business or family things, like the top 5 most important things that need to get taken care of today. Knocked out, boom. And do I always accomplish it? No, because life happens, right? But I know like every day it's the same process, and it's actually comforting. So a lot of people will tell you that, routine is stagnating, especially if you're a creative, right? And believe it or not, I'm actually, as one of my mentors said last night, he's like, you know what? I don't think you realize it, but you're a creative too. And so a lot of creatives will think, well, geez, if I have this like schedule, it's not conducive to my creativity, but Pressfield would argue differently.
Yeah.
And what it does is it gives you a structure of knowing here are the boundaries, and within this time frame, this block of time, that's mine to be creative, right? And if you have the same process day after day after day, I don't have to waste bandwidth. What am I doing today? Like it takes a lot of the stress away. Kind of like in the Marine Corps. Hey, you're wearing the same uniform every day. You've got the same routine. You don't have to think about it. You talked to a lot of vets, and the hardest, one of the biggest stressors coming out, what do I wear? Like having to like think about it, right? Thank God for scrubs. So anyways, my point is like, that the way I keep failure at bay is I try not to allow myself to be failure, and recognize that I've accomplished so much. I was a guy who was like, you're going to go in the Marines? Whatever. To be a really good Marine, you're going to go to college at UT and like excelling, going to grad school. Like, listen, I never thought. I joke about that I'm like a crayon eating, knuckle dragging Marine, and I'm in grad school and doing research and doing well at it. Yeah, okay. And so I've accomplished all these things. Not that the voice is never there. He's always there on all of us, right? But I'm just like, yeah, whatever, bud. And I just kind of go for it. And what happens is, the old proverb, right? The journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. It really is. It's boring, but day after day after day after day. And then you get to the end, you're like, oh God, I really moved the needle, right? And then I just ran into this, I can't remember, the 12-week year. You heard of that?
No. What's it called?
The 12-week year.
Okay. And
the idea is that instead of saying, I have a year to accomplish something, I'm going to take whatever I want to accomplish in a year and compress it to 1 quarter, 3 months. And if I'm going to do this one thing in 3 months, whatever that is, get more likes on social media, increase my follower count, publish, write an article, whatever, right? Whether you're a content creator, whether you're a business, marketer or whatever, you say, okay, if this is the goal at the end of 3 months, what things do I need to put in place to get there? And that actually feeds right into the 75 hard sort of structure that I've made my life around. And it works. It works really well. But the problem, like you probably, is focusing on 1 or 2 things at once instead of like... Yeah.
It takes some discipline, which you seem to have. Maybe it's the Marine background or something that, helped you cultivate this discipline.
Yeah. But you would say this, right, too? Have you found that like discipline is something that you have to work out, otherwise it just disappears?
Yeah, for sure. And it takes me discipline to go to bed early and to get up early, but I'm always glad I did.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and to show up for whatever it is.
Yeah. Like Jocko, he's famous for his Instagram where he just has his watch at 4 a.m. or 4:30 and he's like covered in sweat, right? Have you seen Jocko Willink?
No.
Oh yeah. Check out his Instagram sometime.
I will.
And it's like, it's the same thing every day. And, if you're looking for interesting content from Instagram, it's kind of boring, but also he's telling you a story in that every single day, no matter what, Jocko is taking care of business. He's doing what he needs to do to move the needle forward, whatever that is for him, and he's right. Like if you don't cultivate a daily discipline Andy Frisell says something, if you're not being disciplined daily, you won't be disciplined down the road, like in the rest of your life.
How does that affect your health?
Good. If I don't get enough sleep, I really pay for it. And because I know what will happen when I don't do something. If I'm like, my appetite is hard to control that day, or I'm just grumpy and like, okay, I didn't sleep. So this is all because you didn't sleep well because of whatever. just get through it, make it through the day. And then just realize that, the Marine taught me this, so that you can do more weight when your body's screaming, okay, stop, I'm done. You're really not. You're only about 60% of the way. That's a Dave Goggins thing, right? But it's true, right? Like you just learn that if you just keep going, you've got a lot more juice in the tank than you think you do.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, I'm working on that. I feel like every day that's what it's about for me. Like not stopping, this all just resonates.
Yeah. And here's the thing. You're human. You're going to have days that you fail. Mm-hmm. And so what? Like, don't get too down on yourself. I tell people all the time, like, and I tell myself that, right? Like, okay, so today you didn't adhere to your diet plan, your whatever, your macros. Mm-hmm. Okay. What are you going to whine about? Or what does tomorrow look like? Right. Mm-hmm. And because you're human, you will fail. And you will probably fail multiple times. And it doesn't really matter because what you do tomorrow is what matters. Like what you do today, like what happened yesterday doesn't matter. What you do today, that's what counts. Mm-hmm. And then tomorrow you can't control tomorrow. You can't control yesterday. You can control what happens today. Mm-hmm. And that's the only thing. And when you give people that power, then they can go, oh, okay, I'm not going to stop worrying about this existential stuff that I can't control. I'm going to affect the things I can affect and be the best person that I can be that day. Mm-hmm. And then we'll see where we are in 2 months, 3 months, whatever.
One of the things you said too, in the questions that I asked initially was that, and I've subscribed to this for a long time, but that the pain of not doing it is worse than the pain of doing it.
Yeah.
It's easy to forget that sometimes.
Have you had that experience? Like, can you think of like,
oh my God, so many times. Yes, absolutely. And like sometimes you just are like, well, this is going to suck and it's going to be hard, but I can't not do it because that is ultimately more painful.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So like, okay, for me, for example, like I grew up poor, like so poor. And you could sit there and I made the mistake of going to like 20-year high school reunion. And it was depressing. I was like, oh my God, you people are miserable. Like, I did not rich like you. And I'm like, dude, we all started at the same place. Like you are who you are because of what you did and what you chose. Right. And life does happen to you. Right.
Sure. Like
you can't control acts of God, random people running into you in a car accident, whatever, getting your leg chopped off by a bomb. Nothing you can do about it, right? Mm-hmm. So how you deal with it is all on you, right? So yeah, I could talk about like, and I won't get into the details, but like, I've had failures and I've had times in my life where I'm just like at rock bottom, like, oh my God. And the only thing that will make you feel better is like, yeah, you're miserable, but would you rather be miserable like this and wallow in it? Or would you rather stop being miserable? How do you get there? Here's your plan. Go execute the plan. Mm-hmm. And that's actually the only thing that will make you feel better.
That's a good example of the pain of not doing it is far worse. I mean,
we could talk about a million different things in all of our lives that we've all experienced before. So
I know. I've looked through that lens at life so many times because I'm like, okay, even if you just go down it hypothetically and think, what if I don't do it? What does that look like? How does that feel? And you're like, oh my God, I'm going to look back and be pissed at myself, right. And like, it's going to feel terrible. Yeah. So it's a good gauge for what you really want to do.
Yeah. Well, the other thing, I hope you feel this way too. Again, the entrepreneur space, it seems to me, it's my opinion, right? That so many people are about, grinding 24/7 that they forget to stop and smell the roses and enjoy your life, right? Yeah. So especially if you have kids, relationships, like make sure you spend time doing that, right? Mm-hmm. Super important because, I don't know. I just, for me, like maybe when I was 20 years ago, didn't have kids. I was like, okay, I'm just going to, right. Yeah. And it's great. But now that I have my children, there's a tension as an entrepreneur and as a doctor, like, hey, it's 8:00 and my patient she's like freaking out about something. Like, is it that serious? Or am I going to just pay attention to my kids? And so it's always a balance, right? Mm-hmm. And you have to, like, for me, I would rather not have my kids mad because dad wasn't mentally present. Yeah. Because he was always on the phone or calling patients, but he didn't spend the time talking to me and hearing what I had to say or what I felt about the situation. So. Yeah,
balancing the doctor you want to be and living the life you want to be and being present for those you love.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's your big vision like for your life or for what you want to build?
That's a great question. I would like to build Code One Concierge into a regional or national brand, but it's not just that I want to make money, because who doesn't? But that's not what it's about. What it's actually about is building a home for people and for physicians to become the best version of themselves, like to go on their own, hero journey, right? Like, where are you today and where would you like to be, right? And so from what I've kind of described briefly about the clinic, it's great for patients, right? I have so many patients that they've started down this road, and like a year later, they're doing videos. They're like, "You changed my life. My marriage is better. I'm in better shape. My kids, my relationship with my wife is better," right? But for physicians, because physicians are, let me tell you, physicians are burned out. The physicians have left in droves. Nurses have left in droves. Right now, if I want to go work in an ER in Austin, you can make a crazy amount of money as an ER doctor. Whereas 2 years ago, you can't get a job in Austin. There's no jobs open. Nurses are traveling all around the country since COVID started. There's nurses making $150 to $200 an hour in some places. That's doctor money. That's crazy doctor money, right? And it's because they have just gotten burned out. And I want Code One to not only be a place where people can kind of go on that journey of patients, get healthier, but it's a healing place for physicians and nurses who want to, I want to be the doctor. I want to be the nurse that I always wanted to be, but I never had the chance, right? And so, it's really great. In our clinic right now, it's early stages, but like my front office manager, Sandra, people love her to death. So much so that I recognize that. And, I attribute my success to her as well, because she is the one that they talk to on the phone when they call the office. She is the one that helps resolve things. She's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." And then my nurse, Janine, my nurse, Heidi, they're both part-timers right now. People love them because they're just, they kind of reach out. And so that's the vision. The vision is like to take this model, replicate the system so that I can plug doctors into it. I'd like to actually take the part where I do this boot camp and turn that into an actual thing where I can give people a community. So, outside of my clinic, because I'm only one person, I can only care for so many patients and do it well. So now here's how you introduce patients to this. Here's how you think about your life. And then I'm going to connect you with a doctor who gets it, and they will be there for you, and they will be happy to be there. They will be loving their job and their life, and you'll actually be able to, it'll be a nice little synergy between people. So
that's incredible. Why'd you call it Code One?
Oh, so when I was in Corpus Christi, I was trying to come up with a name, and one of my nurses. So in the ER world, emergency medicine world, there's two types of ambulance calls. There's a Code 1, which is a non-emergent but medical issue. And there's the Code 3, which is on lights and sirens, like the real, like when people think of emergencies and ambulances, right?
There's no Code 2?
No. Don't ask me why. I don't know. Maybe somebody will point it out in the comments. But so I was like, oh, that's okay. And then the nurse who was helping me, she was like, your son's name's Cole, C-O, and Jude, D-E. So it's like, it kind of works on two levels. It's their name, plus it's the sort of whatever. Hence at my emergency medicine background. And it's unique. Nobody knows about it.
Right.
Do my kids believe it's named after them? Some days, like, okay, Dad, whatever.
Are you feeling so much more satisfied now that you've shifted into, how long has it been that you've been doing this?
I started right as the pandemic started. So I opened in January of 2020. And
was that a good thing that you started then?
No. So I was working in the ER full time. I knew the divorce was in process, and the court said, "Oh,
so your divorce is recent."
Well, 3 or 4 years ago.
Okay.
But they were, we would have been at the right time. Yeah. So we're just about done. They said, "Hey, you're going to get the kids full time." Oh, so that had already happened, but I had been thinking ahead of it, like a year ahead.
You have your kids full time?
Yeah, I'm the primary, which is really rare, which is why this is really important to me, right?
Yeah.
Because I need to be a present dad. I'm, whatever. I could go be a doctor dad, and then my kids would never see me, and then I'd be paying for it later. But no, so I had been thinking okay, I need to, how do I want to live my life? There's a friend of mine, Michael Garrett. He's in Westlake. He was one of my mentors. He's another guy who was an ER doctor first and started a concierge practice out in Westlake. And when I was like, "Mike, can I do this?" He's like, "You can totally do this. Just take it slow. Start with a couple of patients, get your feet." Because being trained as an ER doctor doesn't mean you understand primary care. Like, some of the basics, but What do you do with a thyroid nodule? And what, these things that you just never deal with as an ER doctor. Now, if you need to be intubated, you need your chest cracked, if you need, cricothyrotomy, I'm your guy. But
Wow.
drill a hole in your head.
I don't need any of that.
Yeah, let's hope. I always tell my patients, I hope I never see you in my ER ever again. But so it was a lot of like, okay, well, I'm going to start this. I'm going to keep working full time. So I opened the clinic, had a handful of patients, was working full time in the ER in San Antonio, like having to drive from Dripping Springs essentially. And then the pandemic started, and it was like, what am I doing? So I did that for about a year. And in July of 2021, the moral damage from COVID and all of that got to be a lot. I just couldn't stand it anymore. And I couldn't stand being away from my kids. And I had another mentor, a wonderful lady. She's an acupuncturist. And she said, you talk big, but what action are you actually taking to move the needle? And I was like, And so she's like, so put your money where your mouth is, go, do it. And I said, okay, fine. And I started growing, and I tripled the size of my clinic in a year.
Wow.
So it's been a good process. It's a lot of learning, obviously.
Yeah. How many mentors do you have?
As many as I can grab.
Wow.
So, I like to learn from people, right? And I won't name drop. It's not cool, but multimillionaires, people that have successful local businesses, marketing people who are very successful in marketing, because I figure I can't know everything and I don't have time to learn everything. But if someone has replicated something or been successful and I can provide value to them, then I would like to cultivate them as a mentor, because you just never know where you might need information or people, right? And I've done this since I was in the Marine Corps, because in the Marine Corps, in my field in intelligence, it's not always what you know. It is, but it's also who you know or where you can get information. Like you'd have, we call it old boy network, because it was mostly men back then. You could call up Joe Smick at, Camp Pendleton, or John Jones in DC, and they might have the product you needed or point you in the right direction. Because it's always been that way. You can't have the sum of total knowledge. So as a physician, I've kind of I carried that with me, which is I can't know everything about everything. I will know a lot about a lot, and I will know a lot about one or two particular areas where I'm an expert in. And then I'm going to ask and provide value to those people who can help me grow faster and save me a lot of steps if it works, right?
When you say cultivate a mentor relationship, do you say to them,
never do that. No, but so.
Well, I'm like, what does that look like? Because I've only recently, I did a mentorship program where I was the mentor. And I started thinking about, I guess I have more mentors than I thought I did.
You probably do, yeah.
I do. And I actually reached out to one in particular, and he does a ton of sound. He does Lance Armstrong, JB. And I'm so grateful for him. But I was like, gosh, he's really been a mentor of mine for like 10 years. And I told him that then. I was like, you've been so valuable to me, and thank you. Like, I can reach out to him anytime. But I guess I didn't put it in those terms so much. And now I'm more inclined to. So I didn't know, when you say cultivate a mentor relationship, I didn't know if you were like telling them or if it's more of just a friendship.
It's a friendship. But I also remember I told you earlier at the beginning of this, like no experience is wasted.
Yeah.
I have such crazy little nooks of knowledge in my brain and experiences or, ways of looking at things that sometimes I'll just be in a conversation with someone. And now this person could be like a mega successful business person. And, and so naturally the little voice would be like, well, who are you to give them advice? Right. And I always tell them,
right. I've definitely dealt with that, like this imposter syndrome.
Right.
Like, am I qualified to, be a mentor?
Right. And so I've always said like, hey, tell me to shut up if you think, if you already know this, right? Right. Shut the F up. If you've heard this before, or if I'm just being a douche. And they're like, they always laugh. I'm like, no, but seriously, but I'm hearing a problem. What if you did this, this, and this, and this? And what's really amazing is that people who are successful, they don't turn down knowledge. They are perspectives that are useful. They go, oh, okay. Mm-hmm. Like people who fail are not mentally flexible. All right, who fail consistently, I should say, because all of us fail sometimes, and sometimes multiple times.
Sure, it's part of success.
That's right. And so what I try to offer perspective. If it's a medical consultation, I'll have medical conversations, and again, like kind of really getting at root causes of a lot of things. And usually that's such a massive value that they say, you know what, I'm going to introduce you to somebody or I know this person, or, did you know so-and-so and so-and-so? And you've given, you just give and give and give, and I never expect anything in return. And then later, like the current guy, one of my current ones, there's no reason why he should be talking to me. Like, just, no, but I'm just telling you, like, based on sort of objective factors, like, who am I, right? Who am I? And we had this conversation, and even last week I was like, so would you want to pay you for this? And I don't want to just taking your time. He's like, please don't insult me. Just, I'm going to help you because this is fun. This is a really good idea you've got. Let's run with it. And maybe later someday. And I know enough collateral people that I trust them, and he's a trustworthy human. Okay, great. And now I'm going to talk to you you're my mentor in this marketing space, but, by the way, you're bitching about this over here. Let me give you some advice over here. Take it or leave it. Right. And so I want to like give more than I receive, because it always comes back to you. The universe gives back to you what you put out. Right. So if you give out negative energy, you get back negative energy, and vice versa. Right.
So, yes, yeah. I totally agree. Yeah. So we're coming up on time, and I wanted to turn it over to you. And is there anything that we missed talking about today that you really wanted to discuss or put out there, or is there anything that you want to reiterate before we go? I
mean, I guess if I had to say anything, is that like code 1, and you should look for your own doctor. You don't have to be in an abusive relationship with a doctor. So to anyone, if you have a doctor and you don't like them, or you feel like they don't hear you, go look for another one. It's your right as a patient. Never let a doctor or anybody force you or shame you into something that you don't feel comfortable with. That's number 2. And then, in terms of like, me personally, or a code 1 and the people that I work with, like, we really focus on looking at you as a total human being. You are human who comes to our clinic, to my clinic, and we see you as that. And, in my community, I've gotten this reputation as like, I only treat men, but more like 60% of my patients are women, and I connect with them really well. And I do the full spectrum of taking care of all my ladies. Like it's a place that you can come and be safe, you can come be heard, you can get well. And then, if I can solve the problem, I will. So if you're having, mental health, you need trainers, we have a gym in our clinic.
Nice.
Yeah, small gym, but it's there, right? Nutrition advice. Like, we actually aim to have you never have to leave as much as possible. We even have cardiologists that will see our patients the next day. We have endocrinologists and hematologists and oncologists that will come and see patients in the clinic. So I guess, obviously I want to, tout my brand, but really going forward for anybody, like, just find a doctor that gets you. Find a
just
place.
Like there's hope.
Yeah, there's hope. And there's a place that, there are doctors out there who are traditional doctors with insurance. Like, it doesn't always have to be a concierge doctor. Another model or similar models, direct primary care. They're not usually as comprehensive or as involved as I am. I've talked to them. I know I do more than most of them do, and it causes its own stress. But there are really good doctors, even here in Austin. There's a ton of them, actually. So you can always go visit the website, code1concierge.com. That's 1 with the number 1.
Oh, well, you're segueing into the next question, which is, how can everyone find you? Yeah. So, yes, I'm going to put everything in the show notes too. And of course, it's Code 1 Concierge and Alta Infusions.
Alta Infusions.
And I'll put even, how people can reach out to you if they want to, your number and the email address, which is info@code1concierge, 1 the number. Yeah.
And just in general, like, we're happy to answer any questions. Can't do medical advice because we're not allowed to by the state of Texas. So if you call and you want to get to know what we're like, absolutely. Just if you ask a medical question, like, I have this thing and what does it mean? I can't give you advice because that actually establishes a doctor-patient relationship. So we got to kind of shy away. It's not that I don't care. It's just, I'm not your doctor yet, and we can't have those conversations.
So you have to establish that first?
Yes. And so, I've had patients, my acupuncturist mentor has referred several patients to me over the years. And some of them show up with a whole dossier just to interview me, and they have their whole medical records, and I won't go through it with them. They get a little upset, and I'm like, I'm sorry, but I don't want to cross that line. But, happy to have people come and take a tour of the clinic. Happy to have people just see what we're all about. Like, we're real. It's not fake. And, I'm building out the Alta Infusions is our infusion where we do osteoporosis medicines for people with condition who need it. Obviously, do the ketamine. We also do vitamin infusions and healthy injections and nutrients and stuff. Again, in my philosophy of, does it help? Probably. Does it harm? Absolutely not. Okay. And then as we expand, hopefully we'll be able to do massage therapy, yoga, cold plunge, and then IR therapy. So
I was going to ask about all that.
Yeah.
Do you write out your goals and read through them a lot, or do you how's that work for you?
So I do
real quick. I know we're coming up on
No. I do a 12-week plan. And,
you do the 12-week year or whatever?
Yeah, 12-week year. And right now I'm formulating based on some inputs that I've gotten, because I kind of reached a point. I'm like, okay, now what? And as my mentor last night was saying, like, yeah, we plan 3 years ahead. So 12 quarters. And here's what we're doing. And I'm like, oh, right. I need to think longer term. And so I want to make sure that before I step off into the void over the next quarter, next year, that I have a sort of a unified alignment, because, when I start launching a YouTube channel and I want to start having more content and writing and all that kind of stuff. And so I want to be able to make sure that it's all cohesive and not just scattershot like, I could do if I'm not paying attention.
Yeah. So. Oh, that's good. That's good for me too. More advanced planning.
Yeah.
So yeah, God, 3 years. I gotta write some things down. No, that's so awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today and for all that you shared. I really enjoyed it and all that I learned today. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. It was my pleasure. This was great.
Thanks so much, Pete.
Right.
This has been the Amy Edwards Show from Overcome Studios. Remember to rate, review, and subscribe. And thank you so much for being here. Sign up for our newsletter at amyedwards.com.